UNM Director of Athletics Lovo joins me to talk about the Lobos. Welcome back to the Big Mountain. I am JY, and I'm really excited to have the Director of Athletics for the University of New Mexico, Fernando Lovo, join me on the Big Mountain to discuss Lobo athletics. So let's get right to the conversation. And we're pleased to have Fernando Lovo, the VP and Director of Athletics with the University of New Mexico, with us. Welcome to the Big Mountain.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a long time coming. As I mentioned to you, I appreciate all that you do for us in this conference, and just appreciative and thankful to have the opportunity to come spend some time with the Big Mountain, and I believe the dwellers. Right? Is that the appropriate terminology?
That is, yes. We try to call our viewers the dwellers. That is correct. So we're little catchy names here or there. Try to be unique as we can, but. Appreciate it and love your time. I know he had to reschedule. I had a little bit of a scheduling snafu, and I appreciate your willingness to work with us to come on the mountain here. Joining the University of New Mexico here in 2024, December, so about 6 months-ish in here. Formerly you've held administrative positions at Texas, Ohio State, Houston. You talked about just before we recorded, you've been moving around quite a bit here. But what kind of drew you to the University of New Mexico?
Yeah, so there was so much. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't start by saying, probably one of my biggest mentors in my career, Chris Delcani, at the University of Texas, is actually from Taos, New Mexico. And so it's funny how your professional career works. But I can remember, I worked with him for over 7 years, and he spoke a lot about this great state and really what it meant to him and how it helped him grow personally and professionally. And so, as irony would have it, when I was approached about this job, I remember walking into Chris's office and, looking at him and telling him, "Hey, this is an opportunity." And he looked at me and he said, "You better run to that opportunity." He said, "That's a great place with an unbelievable fan base and a passion for Lobo athletics in a great state." That has so many great things, that we're proud of. And, so to me, it really was a no-brainer to have the opportunity to, go through the process and meet all the terrific people that were involved in the process from day one. It was clear to me that athletics is important. And from our president all the way to our board, you name it, right? The support and just the commitment to athletics that was present during the process has shown through in my 6 months here. And so, the opportunity for me, I've always wanted to be an athletic director. That's always been my dream and my goal. And I couldn't have asked for a better place to have my first opportunity than, the flagship institution of this great state. And I'm just so thankful and appreciative of this opportunity to serve Lobo Nation and to advance the mission of UNM athletics. So couldn't be happier about the opportunity, and everything that I thought was going to be the case through the process has been true, and it's been terrific.
Well, you've hit the ground running. I have seen you very active on the socials already. You're kind of all over the place, as all ADs tend to do. A lot of traveling involved, but really just becoming the speaker of the athletics there, and the face of the athletics there at UNM, which is awesome. I know we have a lot of fans of the Lobos, dwellers that are Lobo fans, super knowledgeable, super respectful individuals. And I know they really have appreciated what you've done here already. And I'd love to talk more about athletics, Lobo athletics. That's what we cover here. We're an athletic podcast, football podcast. The Lobos brought in 6 Mountain West Conference titles this year, the most in the Mountain West. I saw on one of the socials, you hashtagged Mountain Best here for this past year, which is really cool. From basketball to tennis, cross country, track. How did the university accomplish this during a academic year, athletic year? I mean, that is just phenomenal numbers, phenomenal accomplishments. How is that put together there at UNM?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I want to give a ton of credit to Eddie Nunez, to Dave Williams, and all the leadership that was here. In Eddie's 7 years here, what he was able to build and do here for the Lobos was just incredible. And I want to make sure that every chance I get, I publicly thank him, for leaving such a good situation that I was able to step into. And so, as people say, you win with people, and we have really, really good coaches. We have incredible student athletes here, and that's shown through this year. I mean, obviously, to have 6 conference championships, the most in the entire conference, is something that we're very proud of, and something that I really wanted to scream from the mountaintops. No pun intended, right? The Mountain Best. I mean, that was a hashtag one of the terrific members of my creative team came up with, and I loved it because it speaks to what we're about. We have high goals, high ambitions, and we have really high standards. And for the most part, our teams and our coaches have lived up to that this year. And you talk about our cross country and track and field teams. I said this. I think I said this to Jeff Grammer the other day. They really carried the baton, no pun intended, again for our championships this year. I mean, they had 4 amongst themselves, and obviously tennis and men's basketball picked up the other 2, and just really just a testament to the type of student athletes that our coaches bring into the programs, but the vision that Eddie had when he hired a lot of these coaches, and just the process that we have in place to compete at the highest level, and just really just a terrific year. As you said, I got here in December. We were able to win championships shortly there. I can remember going here in Albuquerque for the indoor track and field championships and seeing that happen there. And then just a few weeks later, the confetti was falling in the pit with 15,000 Lobo fans, rabid Lobo fans in there. So it's just been an incredible year. And frankly, at a time where we needed it the most, right? We're at an inflection point in college athletics. I know we'll get into that here in a bit, but we're in an audition phase right now, and we need to put our best foot forward, right? We need to make sure that when people think about the Mountain West and they think about this part of the country, the Lobos come to their mind. And we have a great university, we have great leadership, we have a great city, and for us to be able to win championships at that level, I think is really important, and something that we're really going to continue to try to work to build on, but also tell the story about it, because it's critically important for our success and just our overall positioning as an athletic department.
Well, you mentioned basketball successes here, and they've had it for many years. The Pit, probably the best place to have home court advantage in the Mountain West. That is a hard place to come in and play there in New Mexico. And it's I've never been to that venue, but I'll tell you from the video and pictures and things, it looks phenomenal. I can tell you I'm super excited to see the GCU Lopes come, and you can have a little back and forth maybe here in the not too distant future. I think that's going to be a lot of basketball fun there in the southern part of the southwestern part of the country. We're football focused, so I got to get into some football here. The Lobos had kind of the surprise team of the Mountain West here this fall. So much fun to watch. That offense, never out of a game. You never knew what was going to happen. I remember watching their very first game of the season and went, whoa, this offense will be in every game that they play. And in fact, that they were. What can we kind of expect moving forward here into 2025? Of course, new head coach coming in here, Jason Eck. He's coming down from the University of Idaho. I have pretty, kind of not high expectations, but I think he's going to be bringing in a really good program there. What can we expect here in 25?
Yeah, well, I think you're spot on. I mean, what Bronco was able to do last season was really terrific. I mean, the offense was extremely potent. I remember, watching a couple of games there towards the end of the season when, I knew this job was a possibility. And wow, were they dynamic? The Devin Dampier was, elite, and he's going to be a terrific player no matter what level of ball he's playing. And just overall, the receivers, the running backs, I mean, they were certainly elite on offense. And so you're spot on with that, exciting to watch. But looking forward, I was 4 days on the job. I was tasked with hiring a new head football coach. And, to me, I couldn't be more happy, excited, thrilled to have Coach Eck here leading our program. I mean, he is a proven winner. What he did at Idaho was just incredible. I mean, I think they won 10 wins last season. It was the first time in 20 plus years, whatever it was. I cannot remember, but it was incredible, right? And so he came in and hit the ground running. I think he signed 63 or 64 new players, a complete turnover of the roster again, which is unfortunately become somewhat common as we've seen in this day and age. But I went and watched quite a bit of spring ball in the spring game, and he's brought in some really good talent. Obviously, he brought some individuals with him from Idaho, and he's done a really good job and developed has a really good staff, and they've done a really nice job recruiting. And so you talked about expectations. I mean, the one thing I love about Coach Eck is he doesn't shy away from it. He knows what's ahead of him. He knows that the difficulties, the challenges, and the opportunities, and he's embraced all of those. And, I think if he was on this show right now, he would tell you that, he doesn't see a reason why the Lobos can't be playing meaningful games in November. Meaning, are we competing for a bowl game and then hopefully in the future beyond? And I think, that mindset, he talks about championship behavior all the time. It's always about how you act off the field will reflect how the results on the field. And I think a good testament to that is we had the highest GPA ever this past semester of any football team. And so not only is he bringing in really talented individuals, but they're also good people that are about the right things. And so I think that, together with the strength of his staff, and we have Bo Davidson from Memphis, who's our general manager, I think we have really good momentum in the program right now. Our schedule's tough this year. It is. We open up in the big house, and then we've got UCLA a few weeks later, but we're not focused on that, right? We're focused on building the culture, continuing the success that Bronco was able to start last year. And I know our fans, Lobo Nation's really excited. I spoke at an event the other day, and we had about 250 Lobo fans there that were fired up to hear from Coach Eck, and they're ready to see some Lobo football in the fall. So I'm excited, and I'm hopeful and very optimistic about what the season could look like, and certainly in the future.
Well, I'm also excited to see what Lobo football is going to look like here this fall. It's always interesting when you have, at least a coach turnover, and then even, as you mentioned, just potentially a lot of turnover in your players that seems to be more normal now in this NIL era. You don't always know, on paper says one thing, but papers typically lie. You got to, put it on the field, get that good coaching and see what lies ahead. So I'm excited to see what the Lobos have here in the fall. I'd like to maybe shift gears here a little bit and talk about finances, maybe a couple different things with finances. Of course, just mentioned this whole NIL revenue sharing. We'll get to that. But I believe, and maybe you can provide us all an update. I don't follow the legislature in the state of New Mexico very closely, but I did notice several months ago, I believe it was back in February, kind of got some press where I believe it was the Senate Education Committee had approved a bill or moved forward a bill that would have allocated $2.5 million to the University of New Mexico to support the team travel, attendance costs, maybe some other student athlete service types of things. Can you give us an update maybe on that bill or where that actually ended up? And just moving forward, what do you see is needed in this day and age of this new environment for collegiate sports?
Yeah, I think to answer to the last question first, I mean, we need increased levels of investment, right? And we need to uncover every stone when it comes to our resources and the generation of our resources. And so, for us, we're looking at all different avenues, right? We're going to pull every single lever that we can to ensure that, when we look at our overall operating budget, we're on par with our competitors. And unfortunately, if you looked, we have not been. And, we've made steady progress over the years, and that should be celebrated. But we know, again, as I mentioned before, we're at a critical juncture right now in college athletics. And so, we need increased levels of investment. We need to generate more resources. We need Lobo Nation to step up. And I'm happy to say that they have done that in my short time since I've been here. And to echo that a little bit more, you talked about the state legislature and just overall. One, I just want to start by saying this. We are so thankful and appreciative of all of our wonderful senators, representatives, and our governor. Our governor is a proud Lobo graduate. She was at a couple of our basketball games this year, and she loves the Lobos. And, I was very fortunate when I got here. I had to hire a football coach right away, and then the legislative session started shortly after January. And for me, really more than anything, before we even talked about resources and the need for additional investment, I wanted to make sure they understood what my vision for Lobo athletics was, but more importantly, what is the bigger vision for UNM athletics, right, in this new landscape of college athletics? And for us, it was being very clear and very transparent about, where we stood and where we needed to be. And you're right, there was a bill that was presented in the Senate Education Committee that received a due pass recommendation. But from there, we actually were able to work with our state representatives and state senators to find an alternative pathway to securing some recurring funding for our budget to address the needs that you mentioned, right? We see inflationary costs in travel and just, student athlete wellness expenses, nutrition, whatever else it is. And so unfortunately, our budget has not adjusted to offset those. And so those very direct conversations about where those dollars were going to go and how big of an impact they would have on our student athletes, I think resonated very well with those up in Santa Fe at the Roundhouse. And so was very fortunate to be able to secure some recurring funding for our department that was needed in many ways. But again, none of this happens unless there's belief and understanding. And I'm so happy and so proud and so thankful that all those conversations that I was able to have in those 60 days up in Santa Fe, I think resonated. And then when you talk about the success of our programs, to be able to come to the pit and see 15,000, Lobo fans sold out, I think it really just showed and echoed the power of UNM athletics. And then not to mention, the economic impact that we have as an enterprise in this community, in this state, right? Lobo athletics is an economic engine. We generate a lot of revenue in the local Albuquerque community and across the state. And so really this united kind of momentum towards it, I think resonated really well in Santa Fe. And just, again, so thankful and appreciative that they believed in us and what we were trying to accomplish, and very much appreciative of the support they were able to provide us.
Well, that's great to hear. And you're seeing that, of course, a lot more right now. States getting involved, Congress maybe getting involved with collegiate athletics, not from a funding, necessarily direct funding model, but like, hey, what is the new reality going to really look like legally? And let's move just to the House settlement. We now have an approved NCAA House settlement that kind of rewrites the rule books to some level of this revenue sharing. Would love to hear from you on where you think that kind of sets the Lobos up here moving forward, what your expectations are for revenue sharing there at UNM, and maybe just if there's any like pros to where we're at, but maybe some cons and concerns that you may have here moving forward.
Yeah, no question. I mean, obviously all of us in college athletics are entering just a completely new phase of what it looks like to operate an athletic department. And I hear people say all the time, ADs are more CEOs than they are athletic directors. And that's a fair statement. I would agree with that. But for us, I think before we get to revenue sharing, I think it starts back with our collective and our NIL efforts. We were very fortunate. Certainly when I first got here, we had a very robust collective, 505 Sports Venture Foundation, that was started by a gentleman by the name of Kurt Roth, who really, it was a labor of love for him. He was just a huge Lobo fan, a big Lobo basketball supporter. And so, about 24 months ago, I think certainly before I was here, there was a realization that, the passion for Lobo athletics, specifically at the time for Lobo basketball, certainly is there. And how do we leverage that? And so, a ton of credit goes to Kurt Roth and the 505 Sports Venture Foundation, Jalen Dominguez, who's my deputy, who's our chief revenue officer. So we had a really good foundation, and we're able to be very competitive when it came to NIL, for our sports. And so now that you transition into this post-house settlement world, when you're talking about taking this in-house, if you would, we're not starting from scratch. Our donor base that's been so incredibly supportive to this point, through the collective and through other initiatives, it's not foreign to them what we're asking them to help step up to do, right? And so my goal all along since I've been here is that regardless of what the Mountain West looks like now and in the future, there's absolutely no reason for us to not be very competitive when it comes to NIL and rev share. We have no choice, because I firmly believe that the cost of not investing in that is far greater than the cost of investing. We've seen that with great coaches, when we provide them with resources they need to recruit and retain student athletes, championships are not only possible here, but they should become fairly common, right? We have a great fan base, great support. And so we're going to be competitive. There's no doubt about it. That's a moving target. Everybody wants to know, how much are you rev sharing? What are you doing? This, that, and the other. And the answer is, we'll continue to evaluate and what's best for Lobo athletics. But I think the pros, you asked about the pros and cons. The pros certainly are now that, our donor base that's been so committed to helping us build this can now donate to us and receive a tax benefit, right? Where in the past, when they were having to donate to the collective, that was not a 501c3. So obviously that helps from that perspective. But we also can provide additional education and guidance and clarity to our student athletes, that will be compensating them for their name, image, and likeness of, how to use their money and how to leverage that right in the community. So I do see a lot of pros from both the student athlete and the donor side. And then obviously to me, the cons I think are we're building this plane as we're flying it, not to be cliche, but that's the reality. So what do we not know about that's going to pop up, right? And I think all of us in college athletics are trying to be pragmatic and trying to see, 3-4 steps ahead, but none of us really know exactly how this is going to shake out. And so be nimble, knees bent, head on a swivel, as a coach used to tell me, and just be flexible, right? We can't be rigid. We got to be able to adapt, and we always have to do what's best for our student athletes. And that's the key. And that's what we believe in here at UNM. And that's what we're going to continue to champion.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of that fiscal piece and fiscal education piece to the students, and that's something we've tried to bring up as we talk to ADs and certain individuals. And it does give you kind of that hands-on opportunity. It's not just reading out of a textbook of what fiscal responsibility is, but you can be active, or more active at least in that. Is that a piece that you see, that department within UNM? Helping your athletes understand not just the compliance side of it. Yeah, you can this, you can't that, but also now you have this money. Here's how you can either invest it or what you need to be worried about from expenses and all that. I mean, how are you dealing with that there at UNM?
Yeah, I mean, it's our obligation, right? I mean, even before all of this, I can remember when I was at Ohio State, back before NIL was the thing. I mean, our big push was, if you weren't going to play in the NFL, that you had 2 job opportunities by the time you graduated, right? And so times have changed, but our obligation is to develop our student athletes holistically. And I think it's so great and so wonderful that our student athletes can now be compensated for their name, image, and likeness because they bring so much value to our institution. And so in return, I sense an immense amount of obligation to educate our student athletes on financial literacy, on tax implications, on how to leverage their brand. And the good thing for us is we have a great program in place already. It's called the Life Program. Again, Eddie started it back before he left to go to Houston. And so we've been able to really leverage that in this pre-house settlement world, but we're working on ways to really enhance the offerings through that program because now they have to be enhanced because it's so critical to do it. So yeah, we're really, again, you asked about pros. That's exactly what it is, right? We have the opportunity now to be very hands-on with our student athletes because the process is all in-house. It's all transparent and it's right in front of us. And we can now say, okay, this is how we best think we can serve you. And we'll be very individualized in terms of what we do. But yeah, looking forward to enhancing our life program and building on what's already here.
Yeah, and I think that's important both from the educational aspect and the safety aspect, right? Making sure they're not getting into dangerous contracts, agents, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's great that the universities are in much more control than what they had been, pre-house. I got to ask this question. If you can take a step back, you've been obviously in collegiate athletics here for a little while. And maybe 10 years ago, you mentioned that an AD is a little bit more like a CEO now than just about anything. And I'd like to take a chunk of that out specifically and say, back when you started in collegiate athletics, working your way up now being a director of athletics, are you surprised how much time, not just you, but I think in general, athletic directors spend talking about and seeking donations and expanding their revenue base and all that? Is it a surprise to you, or is this something that you've seen coming for years and years and years, and it's just part of the gig at this point?
Yeah, I think it's part of the gig, and again, we're all products of our mentors, and then I was so fortunate the 8 years that I was at the University of Texas, I was able to work for I would argue might be the best fundraiser in the entire country, right? And Chris Delcani just was so good at it, and that the importance he placed on that it wasn't about getting the donation or generating the resources. Of course, that's the end game, but it's about the relationships that he works so hard to be available, to be present, to develop those deep, meaningful relationships so that when the ask does come, it's just part of the bigger picture, right? And so my mentor there at Texas, I think really showed me the way. But even if I think back before that, when I came up in really in the football realm in terms of college athletics, whether it was my time at the University of Florida or when I went to Ohio State, or even my time at Houston, so much of what we were trying to do, and things were different. The asks were different then, but I was really fortunate, whether it was at Florida, Ohio State, or Houston, that I was there during transformational times. And all of those times happened because our fans and our donors and supporters poured back into the program, right? And again, it's different now, maybe a bit what we're asking for. Priorities have changed. But for me, I've always been so fortunate to be at places during transformational times where I saw the impact of stewardship and philanthropy, and then actually being hands-on at the University of Texas with Chris and with the great staff there. I think really not just prepared me for this and really in this new age of athletics, but really allowed me to understand and embrace where it is now. And it certainly hasn't been a surprise. And I'll be honest, since I've been here, the reception, not because of me, but really it speaks to what Lobo Athletics is doing and where it's going, has been terrific, and people have really bought into the vision. So we got to continue to push the envelope and enhance, because the cost of winning has gone up, but the way you go about that hasn't changed. It's developing relationships, selling a vision, and really investing the time necessary to see the results you want.
Yeah, that makes sense. Last couple questions I have, maybe a little bit more Mountain West focused. I know you can't speak for the Mountain West as a conference, but would love to get your take on this. I got to give a shout out to Jeff Grammer. He had done a pre-show for your spring game. I was typed in a question, and sure enough, he was kind enough to put it up, and you answered. And I'd like to talk about it again. And it had to do with like this conference revenue share minimum. So the ACC kind of rolled something out here a little bit ago. And I'm not going to ask you, is the Mountain West going to do it or anything like that. I just want to maybe get your opinion on maybe, again, the good and the bad from a conference level of having some sort of a minimum, nothing aggressive, but a minimum that maybe you're all on the same page working towards a similar goal. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think, and I appreciate you sending in that question on the pregame show. That was awesome. I think it's really good. All of us in this conference are competitive individuals, right? And for us, we're looking at, and I say we, Commissioner Navarez is in her leadership. I mean, we're looking at creative ways to continue to enhance the brand. And I think what we saw with the American and just putting kind of a floor, I think that's all really good. But what makes sense for us, and what does it look like, and how do we implement it? I think that's what we really need to figure out. But this is the reality that we're living in, right? It now takes resources to recruit and retain student athletes. And across the board, you look at the Mountain West, we have incredible coaches and we have incredible student athletes that compete at the highest level here and then go on professionally. And so for us, to be able to keep those young men and women in our conference and have some sort of standard that we can kind of all look at and just, look at each other and say, how do we continue to enhance the brand? I think it's all terrific. I think really when you look across the board, any and all creative ideas need to be on the table, right? There's a lot of really smart people around the table that have incredible ideas. And it's all about how do we enhance ourselves? How do we enhance UNM? And how do we enhance ourselves nationally as a conference? To make sure that we stay on the forefront of people's minds as they're talking about things in this changing landscape of college athletics.
Yeah. Last thing I want to ask you about with the Mountain West, obviously, lots of changes happening out in the West right now with the PAC and everything that's going on. The Mountain West was pretty aggressive in terms of going out and adding some members here in 2026. Love just to hear, your take on where things are. I mentioned GCU. I think they're going to be a lot of fun as a basketball power in all sports. But I think, again, I mentioned them with you guys there at UNM having maybe some pretty good basketball games as well as some others. I love the UTEP ad. Again, maybe there with UNM, that part of Texas, we've said many a time, a little bit maybe more like New Mexico than it is like the rest of Texas, because Texas is so daggone big. Love to hear your take on where things are at here with the Mountain West.
Yeah, I'm really bullish on the future of the Mountain West. I think the commissioner's done a really nice job navigating some choppy waters, if you would. So I think the additions, as you mentioned, UTEP, GC or whatever else. I mean, I think they're all really, really good for our future, and I'm excited to see what transpires, and they'll be here before we know it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there, right? These things change every day. It's just, but I think when you look at just the conference as a whole, as we move into the future, I think we're on really solid ground. As I mentioned, the leadership there at the Mountain West has done a really terrific job navigating through this. And I'm just really fortunate to be able to be in the room with some really talented individuals that have a common vision and belief. Like I said, we're all competitive. We all want to win. We want to do things the right way. We want to continue to enhance ourselves both regionally, but as best we can nationally. And I think we can certainly do that. We have in the past, and I think we can continue to do that in the future because we have good brands. We have great fan bases, and there's really good athletic directors and coaches. And so again, I just am very bullish on the future, and I'm just fortunate to be able to work alongside them and continue to shape what the Mountain West looks like moving forward.
I agree. I think we have some great leaders. So happy that you're now a part of the Mountain West as well, ascending together, kind of climbing that mountain as one unit, competitively doing it, but, trying to all go in the same direction. And yeah, really enjoyed the discussion. Thanks so much. I apologize. My co-host couldn't be with us. Life gets in the way sometimes, but thanks so much for joining us here on the Big Mountain.
No, thanks so much for having me. And like I said, you guys do a terrific job. I'm so appreciative of the coverage you provide us. I will tell you though, we got to get you to the pit for a game.
Yeah. Okay.
First to University Stadium in the fall, and then we'll get you back after the new year to the pit. Maybe we can do a live podcast or something.
Ooh, now we're talking.
But yeah, I appreciate you and all you do for the dwellers. And thanks so much for having me. Go Lobos.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
I again want to thank AD Lovo for joining me for that great conversation on the Lobos and the Mountain West. We do everything Mountain West football, so make sure you subscribe to this channel if you're interested in the Mountain West, the Pac-12, and my co-host Steve follows the Big Ten. So hey, make sure you like this episode, and we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.